one of the big things I keep hearing is that, during 9/11 or Sandy, everything kept running. Everything ran. The bars ran, the restaurants were full, everything was still working. This time, everything shut.
Today I hang out with an extraordinary photojournalist, Adam Gray. The pictures you're seeing were made by Adam in the UK before he made a move across the so-called pond in 2017 to establish a new career in America, working as a director of photography, producing, directing and filming documentaries for digital media and broadcast outlets which gain tens of millions of views. He's a natural storyteller, both in stills and moving images. And then this happened.
It is time now to declare a state of emergency in New York City.
New York, without a doubt, has fought valiantly during the coronavirus crisis, and Adam found himself with a select number of other photojournalists and crews not just covering the crisis, but living it day after day, granted access to hospitals and empathetically documenting the people of Manhattan. I was keen to know a little more about the man behind the pictures coming out of a city that usually never sleeps. First up, Adam, before we even talk about the photography, how are you physically and mentally? Because in a city that never sleeps and all the accompanying cliches that really are true about that incredible place, I can't imagine what it actually feels like on the streets at the moment.
Holding up well, I say. Working a lot, working all day, every day. I'm trying to take the weekends off, but a few times that kind of doesn't happen on certain days just because, nature of the news and suddenly getting access to something. You never really switch off with what's going on at the minute, but all good, keeping well, adhering to what everybody else is adhering to. So I've been healthy, thankfully.
Are the streets literally as quiet as some of the pictures that I've seen coming out?
Yeah, totally. Especially, it depends where you go, but Manhattan itself is very, very quiet. I mean, if you go to the financial district, there's nobody. I saw a colleague posted a picture yesterday, just a man wearing a mask in the middle of one of the office districts, and he said he waited 30 minutes to see somebody.
Wow.
Which is crazy, like the middle of Manhattan.
Yeah. So how did you end up in New York? Because if you look at your bio, everything was moving along nicely on this side of the Atlantic. You got some cracking stories that you were covering, and then the move to New York.
Obviously, I worked as a photojournalist in the UK for a long time, 8 years maybe. And then out of the blue, Sam Barcroft rang me up and asked if I'd be interested in working as a DOP producer in the States, based in New York, covering all matter of weird, wonderful, interesting characters. So it was kind of a complete out of the blue thing, really. A friend of mine actually did the job before me. I'm kind of like a friend of a friend at that point. He's a good friend now. He did the job, so I knew a little bit about it from him, from asking him. It was a complete kind of curveball, to be honest.
One of those weird and wonderful characters, because I was watching some of the films that you shot. And as a DOP, you've got a stack of awards, but there's one film in particular that I was watching earlier on in your archive that caught my eye. You made it in 2018. You probably know the one I'm going to talk about. It featured a New York firefighter who was, by the title of this film, preparing for the end of the world. Now, I don't think we're quite at the doors of the apocalypse. I know there are plenty of conspiracy theorists out there, but there's a point in the movie, nearly 2 minutes in, where you ask him what exactly he's preparing for. And one of the answers he gives is, well, I don't know, a pandemic. I mean, he even had an end of the world closet. What did you think when you met him? You must have been thinking, maybe this guy's slightly over the top with some of these theories.
Actually, I wasn't that. I didn't think he was kind of like that out there in a way. I thought he was actually quite sensible, being a firefighter, being in New York. Actually, I've been watching it, Doomsday Preppers, like the old program.
Yeah,
it's like the extreme end. Really extreme, out in the sticks. People with a lot of guns and with some slightly wacky theories. Like preparing for an EMP attack or something.
Yeah.
Whereas this guy had lived through 9/11, and his whole experience was based on experience. He'd been at Ground Zero. So everything he said made sense. To be honest, it actually seemed quite sensible. I thought it was actually, yes, more than the everyday man would do, or woman. But I actually thought he was quite switched on.
I think
and it was funny when you mentioned him, because I was speaking to my old editor at Barcroft the other day. I say, that's who we should be getting in touch with now.
Yeah.
See where he is, because I want to know where he is and where his supplies are now.
Yeah, I've heard it said by some reasonably well-travelled American journalists that this doesn't feel like 9/11. You mentioned 9/11, and he, of course, was tied up in that. The city came together in an extraordinary way during that time, but it's been understandably a very different event. Whether the city, some people have suggested the city doesn't feel like it's come together. Would you say that's correct?
One of the big things I keep hearing is that during 9/11 or Sandy, everything kept running. Everything ran. The bars ran, the restaurants were full, everything was still working. This time, everything shut. For the first time ever, like you say, the city that never sleeps. This is the first time ever. It's never shut down during war, hurricanes, 9/11. So this really is the first time. But I wouldn't say people aren't coming together.
Your access, Adam, has been complete, unnervingly so, as I look at your pictures. Are you surprised by just how much you've been able to record and how many pictures you've been able to make? I'm
not sure if I'd say surprised, because I've always seen the access that the rest of the world has had. But definitely compared to my own experience of being in the UK, I'm used to being hamstrung at every corner. We just don't see everything that happens in the UK, and it's for a variety of reasons. Whether it's from the government or the police, I find it's hard to be facilitated. Whereas here, access is total, almost. Hospitals are a different thing. Even though I have been lucky enough to go in and record in one, it's still quite difficult because of obviously privacy laws and things. You have to be very careful the way you shoot. But because it's a public health crisis, the hospitals see a need to show their story. So kind of like exceptions are made, and TV are allowed in, and photographers are allowed in.
So they've been welcoming. They've facilitated what
totally.
you need. But
and then there's just a very different perception here, I find, especially with the public, with authorities. People understand. I think people understand the job a lot more. People understand the need for the job. I mean, it's the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. It's written into the American Constitution, and I think there really is an understanding, especially in New York. But especially, I've travelled all over the States. I found it everywhere. People are very welcoming and understanding of your role, and I think it's that understanding that really helps. Like, they know you're there to do a job. Because as you say, I've seen everything, photographed. I mean, to be blunt, I've photographed bodies being put into refrigerated morgues, and that's like a very sensitive situation, like very, very sensitive. And people have come up to me and said, "We understand you have a job to do."
Yeah, I saw a couple of those pictures of yours. I know on your Instagram feed you carefully place them, and actually you put a warning up, I think, before anybody swiped right to look at the pictures, didn't you? Which was, I thought, a very thoughtful thing to do. Those are very difficult images to make, aren't they? And a lot of the time this is happening under the cover of darkness, so as not to scare the general public. But of course they're difficult images, and you've been making them. Would you describe that as the hardest thing you're having to photograph during this time?
I mean, I would say so. It's definitely not nice. Quite a few of the pictures have been at my local hospital. It's a 5-minute walk. I walk past it every day. I've lived in this area for 2 years, on and off. It really is on my doorstep. Like, I walk the dog past it. I go. That's a place I walk past every day, and suddenly that is now, ground zero, so to speak.
What's it actually like? What's it actually like in there? Because I've seen television pictures, but being amongst it is obviously a very different feeling. What's it been like when you go into the hospital? What does it feel like?
So the hospital I went into was Maimonides, which is in Brooklyn. It's a little bit. It's probably like 40 minutes from where I am. It's a bit deeper into Brooklyn. I think it's Borough Park area, which is really hardly hit. But straight, actually, compared to some of the pictures I've seen, which have been really in amongst it, I've seen New York Times did something, and they were right on top of everything, kind of right in there. I was in quite a calm ward, so they had maybe 20 patients ish, and they were all behind glass windows, kind of like a double sealed door. So you go into like one room and then you go into the room. So I was never in the room with the patients. I was shooting through glass. And it was probably 5-ish doctors and nurses on the ward. And it was actually quite calm. It was quite calm. But, a lot of the patients are hooked up to machines. So, yeah, it's quite, it's kind of like quite a stabilized environment, I guess, that what I saw anyway.
Take me through not what kit you use, but what you have to do with this kit every day when you're in these areas that can be contaminated. Are you having to wipe them down, and are you having to treat your job any differently? I would imagine you are.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I don't think I've ever really cleaned my cameras before.
Right.
And not. I know that's probably quite bad practice, but you just don't think about it day to day. You come home. Normally, you go do your job, you come home and you put your cameras in the corner and put the batteries in charge. And now you come back and I have like electric wipes, although the only ones I could find left are about this big and they're for cleaning wounds. So I use like isopropyl wipes and clean all my gear and phone. Anything that's out and about, I clean. Anything that my hands are touching, really. And when I'm out and about, I don't really touch anything that isn't mine. If I touch a door or something, I use hand sanitizer. But yeah, you just have to be careful.
Are you having to wear masks? I would assume whenever you're around these places, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I've worn a mask since day one, pretty much. Yeah. Not everybody did. I think everybody is now. But yeah, I mean, we all saw what was happening in China, I think, and yeah, we've all just had a delayed. What happened there was coming to here, so you could see the pictures, and everybody was wearing PPE and masks. So since day one, I've worn a mask.
We've been talking on the Fujicast about whether or not it's right for people to be making images out on the street, or just to leave it to those officially tasked, like yourself. What's your take on it?
I mean, that's a tricky one. I'd say normal situations. Obviously we should all be documenting everything. At the minute, I mean, I guess the government advice pretty much everywhere is that only essential workers should be out. And from the things I've seen, I agree with that. I think limiting the people on the streets is very important. It's the only way we're going to get past this.
Do you get to talk to any of the patients that are obviously not hooked up on life support or anything, but do you get to talk to any of the patients in the hospital where you've been taking pictures?
No, not really. I mean, where I was, it was patients in kind of like the most severe circumstances, I guess. These are people who had to be like, they're put on machines. So what's the name? Sorry, something like scientific jargon. I photographed patients who were on ECMO, which, if you Google it, you'll see what it is. But essentially, the ECMO. But what it is there's a machine pumping the blood around and taking the pressure off the heart and the lungs. So that's keeping people alive. So the heart and the lungs can relax, the blood is pumped around outside the body. So if you went and look at the pictures that I took, you can see tubes. You can see the nurses holding the tubes. You can see them in the pictures, and that's the blood being pumped around outside the body. So these are patients in very severe circumstances. They're not talking. No.
When you go in to take these sort of images, what are you looking for, Adam, as a storyteller, as a story maker? What goes through your mind photographically?
I felt quite privileged to be able to do it, because like I say, even the access has been very rare, even to hospitals. There's been a handful of TV, a handful of photographers in New York anyway that I know of. So you do kind of just try and shoot everything that you see in the ward quite quickly, because access is quite limited as well. I'm probably in there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But just try to tell the story, you shoot everything. And from being, when I was a DOP, when I've worked as a photojournalist, you try and show everything. You show the whole scene, you show the machines. And sometimes you're working in this circumstance, you're working so quick, you don't actually always know exactly what the story is whilst you're shooting, because, But as you speak to the doctor, and I was lucky, I always shoot video as well. So I interviewed a doctor whilst I was in there. So through talking to the doctor, I had an understanding of what was being done. And once you've got an understanding of what is being done, like the machine and what the patient's going through, you know how to document it. You need to show the machinery outside the room. And you have to, and the other thing is, obviously under restrictions, you can't show a patient's face. So a lot of the time, you're just thinking quite technically, like how can I portray everything that is happening in this room sensitively, without giving away a patient's identity, while still showing what the doctors are doing, which is quite a hard fine line, because you need to be able to tell there's a person there. You need to be able to tell there's nurses working there, but you have to do it sensitively. But yeah, just trying to do everything. And then I also tried to take time to do portraits for all the doctors.
Oh, do you?
So I kind of pulled them aside I'm talking very quick, rudimentary portrait, but I wanted to get each of them for a quick portrait because they're the people who are in there for 14 hours a day.
Yeah, sure. So that becomes part of the story as well. How's it changed your view of the work that you do and how you work? I mean, it may just be another day at the office for you, but of course, with us looking on, we're thinking, my word, I mean, the stuff that you're witnessing, the stuff that you're shooting. I've asked that question of a few people that shot on the day of 9/11. They said, life was never quite the same again as a storyteller.
Yeah, I think for myself, it sounds a little bit cheesy, I don't know, but it's kind of given me a renewed sense of purpose, I think especially after working in the UK, where access is very difficult and you are really hamstrung quite often, being able to come and show a story properly, and and people understand like your role, in society, or even in your job. I'm just trying to document history. Like, as simple as that sounds, that's I studied history at university, and I studied photojournalism, Vietnam War. That was where my initial interest came from. And I think now, especially working here, I finally felt that I'm able to do my job properly. Probably in times that I don't want to sound too negative about the UK and working in the UK as a press photographer, because it's brilliant. I've got some absolutely brilliant colleagues who are making incredible work. But a lot of the pictures that I've looked at through my career have been abroad, and I think the main reason is access. Yeah, it really is.
Well, keep washing your hands. I know it seems such a almost glib thing to say, but that's all you can do, and the work that you're making, Adam, is truly incredible.
Thank you.